My name is Charles Quinton Shaw Jr., and I turned 80 last July. And I had a spectacular birthday celebration and thanking all kinds of people for getting me to this 80th year. And so I was expecting it to carry on through the rest of the year. And it hasn't. So that's a little bit of my testimony today. But the history of getting to this 80th year has been that my mom loved the Lord a bunch. So when we were living in Roseville, which is a suburb of Sacramento, we went to the little Presbyterian church. And if you memorize the Psalm 23, you got your first Bible. So I was 8 or 9 years old at that point. So I was very proud to be able to do that. Then we moved from Roseville to Citrus Heights, which is a little more rural because there we could have a cow, a beef cow every year, which we would devour. But anyway, it helped so that my dad loved being able to eat beef, and beef was still expensive back then. Anyway, so that was the history of being raised in a rural community. Well, at that point, my mom then wanted to plug into the Baptist church, and so when we became part of that, of course, I would go each Sunday with her. My dad would not go. He had broken his hips in an work accident, and so he walked with crutches. So he was embarrassed by his, inability to walk. And so his role on Sundays, we would come home and there would be this amazing lunch, fried chicken and dumplings, pot roast. I mean, all the traditional Southern American foods. My dad was from Georgia, my mom from Kansas. They met in Sacramento at the Air Force Base there and married. And so 1944, which is, the war is still going on, and I was born in 44, so that makes me a war baby. And but the interesting thing about that is none of the guys who had been in the conflict talked about it. They were all very stoic and didn't say much. But my dad was always so handsome in his dress uniform, with the tie and haircut, and always smelled good. Had, I don't know which cologne he used, but when he dressed up, he was really fun. That's sharp. But again, this aversion to being involved in a church. But anyway, sadly, as we continued in the church there in Citrus Heights at the Baptist Church, I began to know too much. And it was my role to be sure that the Sunday school teacher knew that I didn't believe any of it. And so that was at age 13, 14, somewhere in that realm. So I proceeded to work at the local grocery store in between going to school, going to high school. I got out a semester early because I wanted to go to college. And of course, that was way too much for me because they were just starting to teach 0-1 math for computers. And I tried to take that class, and it was like, how does this even add up to anything? Because it's just not there. I started looking around for my people. There was a group called the Kingston Trio back in the day, and it was all folk music. And they did Jonathan Winters imitations too, and they were laughing a lot. And I said, those are my people. I'm in it for the fun. Because my dad had a terrible battle with alcohol. I said, I've seen too much sadness and uncertainty, so I need to pursue the laughs. So that kind of got me started, because a couple of the guys worked at Tower Records where it started in Sacramento. And So I started hanging out at Tower Records because it was open till midnight. You could listen to any record in the store, in the little listening booths, and you could smoke cigarettes. So that was a coming of age process. The good news in all of that circle was that I met my wife on the telephone. Richard Purdy was a friend of hers. They'd gone to high school together. And they would just chat and catch up and what's going on. But one night I was there and he had to go wait on a customer. And so he said to her, "Here, talk to Charlie. I got to go, help this gal." So she had this wonderful voice that was a little bit raspy, but it had an edge to it. And like the song says, "You had me at hello." That was basic. We were 2 hours on the phone. And then just nonstop after that. We just couldn't talk to each other enough. And I hadn't met her. I didn't know anything about how she looked. We eventually met 2 weeks later. I had then, in the interim, been asked to work at Tower Records. So by nature, I loved helping people and helping them find what they wanted and or needed. So it was a natural for me. And I didn't have to know the music. I just needed to know how to find it. So even when the gal would come in who would need some new classical recording, I knew how to find it for her so that she could, get to it and enjoy it. And so that was very fulfilling for me. So comes Saturday, and I'm trying to remember, I think it was September. She had lived in Japan for 2 years with her dad. He was a civilian working for the army. And because of that, she was 18 years old but did not have her driver's license. She couldn't drive in Japan. And so when she came to the States, she needed, her dad wanted her to be able to get around and do stuff and go shopping and all that. So he bought her a Honda 50. A Honda 50 was a little bitty, plasticky looking, moped-ish kind of thing with a windscreen on the front. They were red and white. So on that Saturday, when she pulled up out in front of Tower Records, she came in, she had this little pillboxy kind of a hat, an A-line haircut, and a kind of a nice whitish kind of, long sleeve, maybe 3/4 sleeve sweater, and then ski pants, and then little boots. And she was so pretty. She looked like Audrey Hepburn. Anyway, it was love at first sight. So we went to our first concert together because the Tower Records also had a production company that brought acts to town. And Trenny Lopez was the first act, and he was a Hispanic guy who sang Lemon Tree and La Bamba, of course, did a cover of La Bamba, and played a lot of the Vegas-y kind of circuit. But so that was our first real date. Now, my car I was driving in was a 56 Ford that had been in a wreck, so that the front door did not open. It was kind of shut, and with a bow tie, not a bow tie, but a regular tie, everything was, it was funky. So she did not consider dating me because I had such a hot car. That was never part of the equation. It was so cute. But she heard something in my voice, heard something in my attitude toward her that helped her to put me on the possibility list. Do a quick wrap on all that. We got married in May 22nd, 1965. We're still in the record business, and in '68 we moved to San Francisco, and we lost our first child there. She had an ectopic pregnancy, so there was no possibility of survival. And so the Lord was at a distance for us because she had come from a Catholic background, and even though I'd gone through catechism twice, I I couldn't buy in. It was a little too religious for me. And then we were asked, after the San Francisco store did so much business, we were asked to come and open the LA store, and that's how we got to LA. We had friends who were in LA who was a disc jockey in Sacramento, and he had moved to LA to produce records. So he called me and he said, "Hey, how come you didn't tell me you were coming to town?" Now he's a big 250-pound, 6'5", I mean, big, got one of these big voices, you know, kind of guys, and he's real, his name was Buck Herring. He was having these Tuesday night meetings at their home. They rented a house up above Sunset up on, what is that street up there? Anyway, up on Sunset. So there were a number of us Christians living at that house at that point. Karen and I had not plugged in there yet. And so, but he said, "Hey, on Tuesday nights we have dinner, and then we sing a few songs and pray for each other. You got to come." I said, "Okay." So we went there. But because our daughter had not been disciplined at all, we could not come. We had to stay upstairs with her and entertain her while all the fun was going on downstairs. And finally, Annie's sister, Nellie, offered to babysit Heather. And so we were able to come downstairs and be part of the group and singing and praying for one another and stuff. And on January 5th of 1971, yes, we gave our hearts to Jesus and asked him to come and be Lord of our lives. 3 or 4 weeks later, we went forward to be baptized, and were baptized in the Holy Spirit. And the next morning was the Sylmar earthquake. So we're living in Hollywood. The planet is shaking. And we wake up and said, "Honey, get Heather. We just made it. This is the rapture." So we were thrilled. So we lived with Buck and Annie for a year and got our lives together, and were able to buy a house over here, and still in the record business until 77. I reached the point in my walk, because that was the Jesus music rollout too, 69 through 70s. So we knew none of those people, and by association, when they found out there was a Christian manager at the Tower store on Sunset, we created the Jesus music section in the record store. Really? Yeah, and Pat Boone, lived nearby. And so he came over and wanted to do whatever we needed to highlight this section and create stuff. And so we had a great bunch of kids in the art department. And it was really fun. So you had this special section that was just Jesus music. It was really fun. Well, in my realizing there was a transition going on, because a lot of the music that I was promoting and or selling ended up influencing people's drug use. And having come from a background that we smoked a little weed, but it was not the weed that we smoke today, I realized I couldn't really kind of support this, what I was doing. And so I decided I wanted to get into the Christian music business. And so I went to work for Word Records for a year, selling their records to the folks who put Christian records into Kmart and those stores. Went down and worked for Maranatha down in Calvary Chapel. And then MCA Records had decided that they wanted to be in the Christian record business. And so I worked there from 80 to 83. And then I went to work with Pat Boone, because he needed somebody to do his Lamb and Lion label. Everybody started coming over to Church on the Way because they knew about Jack Hayford. So then we came over in January of 72, because we were still working in the nursery. And then in April of 1972, if you want to be a member at Church on the Way at that point, stand up. So we stood up and we became members. 1972. It was those little incidences that you have. And our son was born that year. Zachary was born in March of 72. So anyway, we just became plugged into Church on the Way. And I continued in the record business and working with Pat Boone all these years. The real turnaround for me from that first, I call it my 13-year journey. When I was 13, I decided I knew much more than the Bible could ever know. And then at age 26, received the Lord, recognizing that He is Lord of life. The Lord walked me out of all kinds of embarrassing moments for my dear sweet wife. She loved me like I didn't deserve, of course, as every woman figures that out. You do marry a human being. That's the good news and the bad news. And we're sitting here in this building. I found fathers here in the congregation, guys who were 20 and 30 years older than me, who just kind of put their arms around me and taught me how to love, taught me how to be loved and allow God to love me. And that's how I began the process of being involved with men, because my dad, of course, was broken, kicked out of his home when he was 13 years old, and all kinds of, the miserable stuff that can happen in people's lives. So that's when I became interested in men's ministries and became involved. At the same time, Karen and I were helping in the pre-marriage classes and having so much fun. She was a very bold, open woman, and she was really cut to the chase kind of person. Everybody who knew her loved her because there was no question of how you related to her, because she was open and honest and wonderful, and people loved her. When we had the service for her in the prayer chapel, over 250 people showed up for that service. It was just such a spectacular moment to recognize and acknowledge her uniqueness and the wonder and the contribution that she had made. As I mentioned last year, we had the amazing 80th birthday party, and my daughter came out from Richmond, Virginia. My son couldn't make it. He had a DJ gig in Sacramento, so it's okay. Anyway, but a gal named Brenda Rippey was very involved I met her doing Rooted. Very transparent, very wide open, a sense of confidence. And then I find out she had 10 years of working with addicts in Malibu. So she was really skilled, and a makeup artist, so she had access to a lot of famous people. But she had done the work. She had done the good work. I recognize her transparency, the same transparency that my wife lived in. And so we immediately bonded. Of course, her comment to when your mom said you've got somebody who kind of partner with you in this Rooted thing. His name is Charlie Shaw. And of course, her response was, "Who's Charlie Shaw?" And so that was the beginning. So now I've become like a dad to her. And I actually call her Queen Esther, and I'm her Mordecai, because she's been raised up for a special time, as we all know. I mean, when you watch her transparency begin to welcome people into the reality of the kingdom of God, it ignites you. And people that she works with are from every background and sexual orientation on the planet. But they're totally comfortable with her, and they're totally acknowledge her openness, and they're always asking about how's church, what's going on, what's God doing, and she just lives it out. And so she's become a great resource to me, to helping me manage some of my current illness and getting me to doctors and trying to get diagnosis and that kind of stuff. She's really been a big part of my survival in this whole thing. Anyway, but my life in the Lord has become very focused right now on my health. And I find that to be very discouraging, but I just heard from Wes Gross that his dad, who's 96 years old, 96 on hospice, and he's on the landing strip for eternity, is still living, and every day, isn't God good? Isn't God good? And I said, I agree 100%. This is the weakest I've ever been in my whole life, but I am 100% more confident, more solid, less wimpy, less complaining, less, doubting than I've ever been in my whole life. God has given me confidence to walk through each day with a sense of confidence and not willing to become angered or disappointed or frustrated. It's interesting having been at one point a young person. No, I have a real passion for young people. I really do, because you have life in your hands right now, and the fact that you operate in such purpose and sense of purpose, it thrills me. I was just a dope smoking goofball who loved music, and I thought, where's the party? It was just a waste of time. So that's why I've given my life. I'm on my second round of serving, a couple of years ago, and serving in high school. This would be about 4 years ago, maybe 5. I'm out here playing with the high school guys, and we're shooting some baskets and stuff. And Tom comes over and he says, Charlie, he's 50, he's 40 and change. He said, are you serving with high school again? And I said, yeah. And he said, you were serving in high school when I was in high school. So I have a real compassion for the young people, because I know what being a teenager is and isn't, and how it can deteriorate, and you don't have any sense of purpose and responsibility. That's why I'm so proud of you, because you obviously know who you are and where you're going, and know that the author of our lives is the finisher of our lives, and we get to walk with him through this wonderful, wonderful process. And that's the passion that still burns. It still burns. And so I've always, the odd thing about ministry for me, I've always been invited in. I've never been pursued being involved. People have come to me and said, Brandon and Karen, I met them the first day they were here, and I just loved them immediately, because her name was Karen and my wife's name was Karen, and I know the value that there is in names. Our names really do carry weight. Anyway, so they invited me in to serve with the young adults. And before that, Ben comes up to me. He says, you know what? You're 73, and I think you're supposed to, serve the freshman boys. I went, what? 13, 73? Are you out of your mind? And I said, how are they going to relate to me? The funny thing was, I thought about it for a minute, and I said, okay, wait a minute. 13, 73. Okay, you're talking about emotional age. Yeah, I'm pretty much 13 still. So that started an almost 4-year journey. That transitioned after the Gross Boys. They said, hey man, you got to come to Young Adults, it's really happening. And so I started showing up at Young Adults, and have been there ever since. And until my health failed in January.
What advice would you give to someone who feels like they don't have a purpose?
Get one. No, I think that's part of the lie of the world that we live in, is that we have to sort through what life throws at us and sort through what it says, what the belief is about how life works. And you have to decide, again, tracking my desire to hang out and have fun led me to the record business, but it also acknowledged the fact that I really love music. It really is a reality that we live in. There's a harmonic frequency going on in the universe that we're functioning in. And that all of a sudden opened up much deeper understanding of what music is really about. It's the harmony of the universe. That's the Lord's grace to us all. And so it's given me a much more appreciation of, but I didn't start there. I started pursuing something that I liked. And I saw this as a potential way to enjoy music and also make a career. So getting to your purpose, though, is always an interesting journey, because you're going to, at your age, you're finding out how many wonderful things there are to do and be. And as you pursue those things, you're finding out which ones stick and which ones don't stick. And you're sorting through the purpose is letting go of the things that don't work for you anymore. This becoming an adult business is really needs some exploration outside of the college path. And it just thrills me because you're doing it. You are absolutely doing it. And that makes you a better human being. You know, people discount the value of the arts and the humanities and all those kind of things. There's a human experience to be learned in that. And it's all Bible-based if we really give it a chance, because we know the Word of God is true and living and sound. And in allowing the living Word to penetrate our soul, we begin to find out the things that resonate with us. And that resonance is the thing that we begin to hone in on. Purpose is not some one thing you do. Purpose is always growing into who you're becoming. And that's an ongoing process. 80 years old, still growing. You know, I'm a lifetime learner. You know, I cannot learn enough. And I thrive on the Word of God and the value that it has. And there's so much great media now that's available that gives us historical background and validation for the truth of the Word of God. This is an exciting time to be alive. Yeah. Even though everybody, you know, there's a huge force in the opposite direction, there's a magnificent force that is 10 times any of that more. And we're really, really in an amazing time in history. And we've never been here before. And as long as we keep it a day at a time, our purpose will unfold for us. And the thing I'm learning a lot more from Brenda right now is allotting time, designating time on my calendar, making that time have purpose. I think being real, transparent with what's going on in your life is a huge help in sorting through your purpose and sorting through, helping other people sort through their lives. Purpose.
Thank you. If you could go back and give advice to your younger self, what would you tell him?
Agreed. No more deprecating humor, you know, putting yourself down, and no more catastrophic thinking. You know, thinking the worst possible scenario is going to unfold, and, you know, always thinking, you know, this is going to lead to disaster, and having, again, eliminating most of the negative thinking, because that is all out of fear, and we know who the author of fear is. I would tell my younger self, come on, man, stabilize, no more weird thinking, move forward in confidence of what God can do for you in this situation. And he's been there all the time. You know, and the struggles that Karen and I had in our relationship, and every relationship is a process, were based on my fear of losing her, my fear of thinking that she doesn't love me anymore. I mean, all that weirdness, it just creeps in. And that wasn't, she was my cheerleader. She wanted the best for me always. And I think that her ability to build me into the man that I am today is resonant. I mean, everything that you see in me that is good is Jesus and Karen, because women build men. And I'm finding out recently that women have more brain cells. Women are smarter. Women are smarter. Well, that was intimidating to me. You know, she would tell me something, you know, I would suggest maybe we want to go. No, I'm not doing that. I'm going, what? Why? I don't understand. So all of a sudden, the lights went on. I needed to appreciate her gifting. As soon as I did that, then I started becoming a better man. Because women have this building, multiplying, intensifying role in men's lives. That is such a vital, important sense of service. I would say to my younger self, you're gonna marry an amazing woman, and it's gonna be amazing, and it'll take you way beyond your comfort zone, because she's gonna be smarter than you, she's gonna be brighter than you, she's gonna love you more than you deserve, and she will make your life 100% better, and you're gonna know Jesus much better than you would have had you not married, because she's going to be part of that refining process in my soul that's going to make me a better man.
Great. Thank you. Or what kind of legacy do you want to leave here? That was this year.
I think my legacy is, I came from a dysfunctional family, and so I kind of grew up having a disease. The disease was to please. So I was trying to be Mr. Nice Guy. And there was no balance, there were no boundaries. So that began to sabotage our marriage and our relationship as I became famous. That would be my biggest legacy, is listen to what God is doing, because we all need boundaries, we all need a sense of responsibility. And my legacy, as I'm sitting here with you, is that most people think I'm okay. People are drawn to me. I cannot reconfigure my face, but people think I'm okay. And I don't have any role and responsibility in that. And I'm loved, I'm liked beyond my wildest dreams. I mean, I really am part of the furniture, the foundation of the Church on the Way. And I want to always be known as a man who loved well. He loved the people, he really cared about people and wanted their best. Because some of the friends that Brenda and I have now, their parents are dying. So I'm a new dad to all these wonderful new daughters. And it's really fun to be able to show up for them as a dad, to show up for them as an older sibling, to encourage them and invest life in them. So I would think that people, if you hear the name Charlie Shaw, it would at least lead to one smile, because you'd have a sense of well-being because you heard his name. And that would be my legacy.
That's all my questions I have.
You did good. I enjoyed it. I'm as you can tell, I'm a blabbermouth.
No, that was really good. Yeah.
Now you've got, I gave you something to edit.
Yeah.